Hello and welcome to the 41 Minutes of Heaven we call the D1 Baseball Podcast. I am your host, Michael Patrick Rooney. Today's episode brought to us by our good friends at pitchLogic. It's the system used by players, coaches, scouts, and instructors at all levels of play, from youth leagues to the big leagues. It's easy to use and affordable technology that makes the platform accessible to every player at every level. All the metrics and features used at the highest level of our sport. See pitchlogic.com for more information. So a little special pod today here at the end of the fall, and I've got two great guests. We've got Lary Sorenson here, and we've got Andrew Checketts. And as I told you guys, I want to go through your backgrounds a little bit because just you get yourself ready for this. I read my scouting reports on you two, and I knew I liked you guys, but I was even more impressed when I read the scouting report than I was before. So Andrew, I'm going to come to you second because I was very familiar with your background, obviously. So Larry, like your big league, I'm gonna say this. I know you from listening to you do the Wake Forest games. You do a ton of Wake Forest games. Obviously, they've been so prominent over the last couple of years. And if I'm not mistaken, this is only they had three for the Demon Deacons had 3 first-round picks last year, and that hadn't been done since 2004. When Coach Graham had those Rice teams and those 3 pitchers. But so Larry, I always knew you were a 10-year big leaguer, but that just kind of like, I know that's like, there's very few humans walking the planet Earth that are 10-year big leaguers, but your 10 years in the big leagues were different than most people's 10 years in the big leagues. You have 93 big league wins. You made 235 career starts in the big leagues. You threw 69 complete games. I think if I grabbed 30 big league pitchers right now, I couldn't get myself to 69 complete games. You threw 281 innings in 78 the year you made the All-Star team. You were 18-12 that year, 3.21. I mean, just incredible what you did as a big leaguer. So I didn't realize you pitched at Michigan. Were you a Michigan kid growing up, Larry?
Yeah, I'm from the Detroit area originally, and grew up watching the Detroit Tigers and falling in love with them. And from the time I was 8, wanted to be a Major League Baseball player, and I wanted Ernie Harwell's job, and ended up doing both by the grace of God, and worked out well. You know, I always say too, Runes, that I had 103 losses to go with the 93 wins. You know, so we can't forget the other side because you learn from failure.
Oh, that's awesome. No, did you play as a Detroit kid? Were you playing a bunch of different sports and then just picked baseball when you got to college?
Well, it was pretty clear what my best sport was going to be, although I like basketball most, but baseball clearly was going to be my pathway to school. And I had a sister at the University of Michigan, 2 years older than me, lived about an hour, which is just the right distance from home, from mom and dad, because you can take the laundry home when you want to or get a free meal, but they also can't just drop in on you. So Michigan worked out perfectly for me. I'm on the 48-year plan currently because I never did go back and get my degree. But you go to school to get a job, and I got baseball and I got broadcasting after, so it's worked out.
That's awesome. What did you when you because you got to the big leagues pretty quickly, if I'm doing the math right? Did you have a pitch, or were you a hard thrower, or what was kind of your MO?
Absolutely not a hard thrower, which is one of the things that interests me so much about the way baseball is today, because we're depending so much on movement. In today's game, I'd probably be a 92 to 93 guy, but a bowling ball sinker. That was my out pitch. And I came up with a slider that went the other way. So I had 2 pitches that looked kind of the same, but they went different directions. And then I threw a changeup just often enough to make the advanced scout say that he'll throw it to left or right-handers, but I didn't concern myself with that. But I learned how to make the ball move. Ray Fisher was our pitching coach emeritus, a guy that pitched in the 1919 Black Sox Scandal World Series. And he watched me throw about a dozen pitches, and he said, "Son, you better learn how to turn it over because that fastball will not play in the Big Ten." And so I started learning about baseball movement from an early age and concentrated more on that because I never did throw all that hard. I've got a bubblegum card that lists me with 3 average pitches and 1 below average, but somehow parlayed that into 10 years.
Still though, I can't get up. Like, I'm going to be thinking about like that many complete games in 2 weeks. Like I'm going to do some digging, Larry, in the next few weeks during Christmas break, and I'm going to try and find how many pitchers I have to add up to get to 6. I bet you there weren't 69 complete games in the big leagues in the last 5 seasons. Like, it's incredible to get 27 big league outs. That ain't easy. I'm certain of it.
Well, part of that is that I was never a 100% effort guy. And
Yeah.
Andrew, you got to watch you guys pretty carefully. How much effort does it take for him to throw, and how much is it taking out of him inning by inning? And also, it doesn't hurt when you've got Robin Yount and Paul Molitor playing behind you. I mean, it didn't take me long to figure out a ground ball up the middle. Pretty good chance we're going to get an out of it. So if I can throw a first pitch ground ball, that means I can hang around longer. And, they talk about those Maddox games of the low pitch counts. I've got a handful of them with 70 plus pitches in an hour and 45 minutes. And when we were gone. So you throw ground balls on a grass field and hope for the best.
Oh, that's awesome. So, Andrew, so you are entering, if I'm doing my math right, you're entering your 14th year at UCSB, and you guys have, obviously your program has been just awesome. You've been to Omaha as a Big West program in 2016, had to go the hard way, had to go to beat an incredible Louisville team in that super regional. You guys have hosted a regional twice, including last year. When I looked into it, Santa Barbara has always been an interesting program, but before you guys got there, 8 regional appearances in 50 years, just over 50 years. And now you guys have gone 7 times in the last 11 years. But what I think is really cool about your background, Andrew, is you have been around some incredible head coaches. So you grew up, I think, a Portland kid in Oregon. You went to Florida first, then you came back to Oregon State. So here are the coaches that you've been around as far as I can tell. So you've been around Andy Lopez, Pat Casey, Dennis Rogers, definitely the most underrated of this group at RCC. That guy, just an incredible coach. George Horton, Doug Smith, another very underrated coach. Anyone you'd add to the list, or that's a pretty good list right there?
Well, Jack Smitherin. I mean, Jack,
yeah.
Hall of Famer, ABCA Hall of Famer, and Gary Henderson, head coach at Utah, was my pitching coach at Florida. So I was able to work with him, and I'm sure I'm missing somebody, but yeah, I've been really fortunate to be around some really good baseball minds and good teachers, and tried to pick up what I can from them along the way, and take what I could.
Was that your connection to Florida, Andrew? Is that you're a Portland kid and Gary's a Portland kid, and then, or I think Gary's in Oregon. No, he was Eugene. That's right.
Yeah, he's Eugene. Pat Bailey was my high school coach, so we forgot to mention him.
Wow.
So talk about, you got a national championship coach is your high school coach. So that started there, and Pat and Gary knew somewhere along. I'm not even clear on the exact story, but they knew each other. Andy was still at Pepperdine initially, and they started recruiting me, and then they went to Florida. Gary was hired as the pitching coach there. He knew Pat. I was kind of a late pickup for him in that summer, after my senior year.
Were you left-handed? You were a left-handed pitcher?
I was not. I was
undersized righty.
Undersized, soft tossing righty. Yeah. So, I had to learn how to field my position.
That's awesome. Were there any, when you played for Bales at your high school, was there any other players of prominence? Were there any other guys that went on and played in college?
My brother was on that team. He played a year in college. We had some guys play, Division II, Division III. I don't think we had anybody that ran through there that played at the Division I level. But there, Mitch Williams went to that high school way back. He holds all the records. He and his brother hold all the records there from, I don't know how they ended up there. There's some Texas roots there, but he's probably the most famous alum that played there.
That's awesome. Very cool. All right, so let's jump in, guys. So we're going to talk about pitching and pitchLogic, and so I was coaching in the year 2000. Never really coached pitchers except for when I had to as like a high school coach or junior college coach, and that always went poorly. But I do pay attention. And here in the year 2000, if we were to take a time machine, here's what I perceive pitching development to be back in the year 2000, even at the college level, the big time college level. So if I'm a pitcher in the year 2000 and, clearly I want to throw harder, everyone's always wanted to throw harder. I was going to do 2 things. I was going to lift weights. I was going to do strength and conditioning, and I was going to do long toss. And those 2 things still apply to me, right? Like those 2 things are, and I would throw, right? Like we were taught back then that the more you throw, the more chance that you're going to throw hard. But I would say it did feel like the kids that made a jump in the weight room, or the kids that really took the long toss seriously, those were the kids that made a jump in velocity. Now, here are the other parts of pitching development. I needed to do 2 things as far as secondary pitches go. I needed to be able to throw it was more slider than curveball back then. Curveball felt like an adult's pitch, like a 25-year-old's pitch. And in college, you're 19, 20, right? So I needed to be able to throw my slider for a strike, and I needed to be able to throw my slider, in the dirt for a punch out, right? Like for swing and miss. So I really threw the same pitch 2 different ways. I needed my slider in the strike zone. I needed my slider for a ball. I needed to just experiment with changeup grips until I found one that was comfortable and the hitters told me it was a good pitch. And then if none of those first 5 things were working, I would change my arm slot. Like if the hitters were telling me that the first 5 items on my shopping list were not going well, then, the person speaking right now may or may not have been a guy in junior college that had everybody try to throw sidearm, right? Like it was like, as soon as there's a lot of barrels and loud contact, we're dropping arm slots. But, like that was the thing. Like some kids just didn't throw good strikes. They were too far over the top. And sometimes it was too straight, those types of things. So what do you guys think? So Andrew, you're going to go first. Did I miss anything on the list? And then how have things changed?
I think you forgot running poles. You forgot that one. I mean, I think somewhere along the line, somebody thought that was good for our legs. But I think it was really just to keep the pitchers busy and out of the position player's hair for half the day. So, I think you can't forget about that one. So, I think you nailed it. It's pretty close. I mean, that arm slot change is, right before you get cut. So, if you ever got to that point, Mike, that's when you get to stop pitching. So
knuckleball.
Knuckleball. Yeah. That might even be after the arm slot change.
That's right. Yeah. That's for the club team. You'd have to go win 50 games for the club team first.
Yeah.
So Andrew, tell me how, like you're coaching pitchers in 2025, what's different? And that's a very big question, but what has changed?
I think our ability to quantify things has changed. I mean, you talked about the feedback from the hitter. And that still obviously really matters. Ultimately, it all comes down to your ability to prevent runs and to get hitters out. And you do need to, even though we have all the data and all the analytics, there's still some head scratchers where you go, hey, this pitch should be working and it's not working because the hitters, for some reason, see it. So that still matters. But I think, our ability to really quantify what we're doing, to guess less, to get immediate feedback and give immediate feedback. I think it just speeds up that learning curve. And I talk about that a lot too. We have this data, this information that it allows us to work on something and not wait until it's been hit over the fence to go, hey, that wasn't very good. And so I think that's what's changed. There's a lot of things that have changed in regards to the development side of things and the velocity development, some of those things. But I mean, you talked about weight room and long toss. Those haven't gone away. Those are still here. I mean, that's still, those are still foundational parts of, I think, developing, strength and arm strength, depending on the pitcher and what their needs are. But I think today's day and age, just our ability to quantify things, I think really help pitchers. I know it's helped me a lot, as a pitching coach, where I feel like I am guessing less. Or if we are going to drop somebody down, there's going to be a reason behind it.
Yeah. I love what you just said there too, Andrew. It's like, we don't have to wait for a guy to give up 3 home runs in an inter squad game to at least have some hypotheses on what might happen, whether it gets confirmed or not confirmed. At least you're not just kind of like blindfolded throwing a dart. Larry, so let's go to your playing career. Like I'm picturing you get to Michigan, your dreams to be a big leaguer, and the step up in competition it's dramatic. And now you have this Hall of Fame coach that's telling you, hey, this straight fastball you've been throwing is a no-go. And so like I'm picturing some panic, like, oh boy, okay, that's not awesome feedback. What are we going to do about it? Like development in 2025, I would imagine you just started turning the ball over and hoping it was going to work. Is it fair to say that like some of the new stuff would have helped you shorten that learning curve?
I don't think there's any question that the new technology, along with the education process of the coaches, the coaches are so much more sophisticated these days and they know so much more. And they're not doing it just by eyesight and gut anymore. They're able to put numbers to it, and they're able to see the pitches and slow it down and watch how the ball turns and rotates and everything else, and find, as Andrew was talking about, find the best way to do something and make those adjustments before you finally get to it. And, some of the things that I did that I had success because I was 6'2", 190 when I went to college. And so you threw well enough that I was going to get some people out. But when I got to the big leagues, and as you mentioned, it was just a year afterwards, I had George Bamberger and Calvin Coolidge, Julius Caesar Tuskahoma McClish as my pitching coach. And one was a Native American from Oklahoma, and the other one was from Staten Island, New York. And he's using an F-bomb every third word, and Cal wouldn't say boo if he had a mouthful of it. And they just, the knowledge came in from different ways. And if the player is willing to absorb the knowledge and make the changes that the coach sees, then you've got a chance to progress. But by being able to document it, quantify it, it's right there in front of you. It's hard to argue with somebody when they can show you the actual difference.
That's really good. All right, so here's the first question I want to answer, and I'll start with you, Larry. So the question is what is pitchLogic? And to put some context around it, this is really new technology, this pitching development technology. And I think in any walk of life, when something's new, the first company in becomes the term, right? People used to say, could you make a Xerox of this for me? Well, Xerox is a name of a company. It's not that's actually, you're making a copy of something. Hey, can you hand me a Kleenex? Well, Kleenex isn't a tissue. A Kleenex is the company that makes the tissues. So I think we've suffered from that. Suffered's a little dramatic, but that's been the case in pitching development where the first companies in become the language. We're dealing with this with the stuff PitchCom. I call everything PitchCom, and I'm sure those companies are ready to throw something at the television set when they no, PitchCom is a company. It's not a thing. So I think pitchLogic, we have to help people with that, Larry. And as I understand, it's a baseball. It's a baseball that you hold in your hand, but you take it from there.
Well, you're exactly right about being the standard. And TrackMan is the gold standard right now because they were first into the marketplace. And Rapsodo came shortly after that. And they're systems that use a lot of extra hardware in order to do what they do. And what we did was put a circuit board, and two founders that started the company back in 2018, a couple of founders put a circuit board inside of a baseball, experimented with Major League Baseballs. So there's a circuit board that's surrounded by a core of polyurethane, and they experimented with that to make sure it bounced the same as a regular baseball does. And then we got Rawlings leather, and we put the leather around that. And so it's got all the same feel of a Major League Baseball, but it gives you the same numbers and same kind of information that the other products and technologies that are out there. We had one competitor that put it inside of a baseball, but they're no longer around. So we're really the only company that is doing it from inside the baseball. Connects by Bluetooth to a smart device, any kind of an Android or Apple product, and you can use it on a tablet or your telephone by Bluetooth. And by the time the pitcher throws the baseball, catcher catches it, and he turns around, the information is already available. And it includes video. It includes a clock face that shows the arm slot, the spin direction, all those things that we've been talking about is right there for you to review immediately after you've thrown the pitch.
So what I hear you saying, Larry, is basically if I'm a high school coach, which I was at one point, I need one of these baseballs, one of these pitchLogic baseballs, and I need people on my team with smartphones. If I've got that, I'm in the game.
Yeah, absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. And obviously we style the package to to whatever needs the coach has. Andrew has been great with his guys. And, you have to have a coach that's open-minded to learning because it is new. We didn't have all this, certainly back in my day, but in your days when you were coaching, and it's still progressing all the time and changing. I was very fortunate because I got the Wake Forest broadcast job in 2011, and Matt Hobbs came in during that time, and Wake Forest started their pitching lab. So Hobbs and I would talk, and he would say, oh, the XY axis, this and that. And I'd say, all I saw was your guy flattened his wrist. He spun a slider and somebody took him 420. And he would say, yeah, but this is what it should have done. This is what it did. And he was able to show me. And now Corey Muscara, who was there, is one of the doctors. So my mentors in this journey have been Matt Hobbs, now at Arkansas, Corey Muscara, Wake Forest, and Chris Fetter, who was at Michigan and now is the Detroit Tigers pitching coach. And that's 3 pretty good guys to learn from along the way. And they convinced me that this is a way we can show you why the ball did what it did, even though you thought you were doing this. And that really made sense to me.
Yeah, love it. Hey, so Andrew, you're the boots on the ground. You guys are using this with the Gauchos. The some of the technology I picture as, some of the technology is like this big install into your stadium, right? Some of the pitching technology is I'm picturing student managers running around with something that looks like a, what you put music, written music on, whatever they call that stuff. This seems different, but for you guys, how have you used this, pitchLogic at UCSB?
First, we got it initially, and we were early adopters on TrackMan. We had TrackMan in the ballpark early. We've had Rapsodo units. We've got the portable TrackMan. We've tried to invest in a lot of these things, and initially bought the ball, and my initial thought. Do you remember those, Mike? You'll remember this, like the radar gun balls. You like push the button and throw. And, when you're my age, that's what I initially kind of thought. And it took us a little while for us to figure it out. And then, once we figured out, and it didn't take long, it just took a while for me to really dig in. And once we figured out how simple it was to use, it opened up all kinds of windows for us to be able to use it. So we use it in catch play. We make sure every single one of our guys has one. I've got actually behind me right now, I've got 10. I'm getting ready for our exit meetings, and we send every guy home with one. So it's out there during catch play. We have iPads. They can sync it with their phones. We will have student managers that will be there to help read them the numbers if they want. They don't have to have them when they're out playing catch on their own. They'll use their own phones. Occasionally it'll be in a bullpen. We had some issues last year where we were dealing with some sun issues, and our at the time it was a Rapsodo unit, and the Trexo we weren't picking up. So we went to the pitchLogic because the sun and the shade and the setup, we weren't dealing with that. We had a battery issue one time. So we have them around. All of our guys have them. We're using them primarily during catch play. I found they're really useful during rehab as well because they do give you a velocity reading. So we'll utilize pulse sleeves early when we're trying to just track arm speed. And then once we get to the point where we're using velocity as a metrics for that rehab throwing program, we'll use the pitchLogic because it's a lot easier for the guys to do that than to have somebody out there with a radar gun for every single throw. They can do it on their own. So I found it to be really useful. I think Tread did a recent breakdown comparing Rapsodo. Everything's in range. And none of them are exactly the same, but they're all in range. The numbers are all in range. So, our guys have enjoyed it. I think from a pitch design perspective, the immediate feedback, the ability to get that feedback during catch play during the week and not wait until you are on the mound or in front of one of the machines, either on the main diamond or in the bullpen, I think really can help speed up that learning curve again.
Hey, this is 2 follow-up questions for both of you guys. So question number 1 is I don't understand all these numbers, so I would have to teach myself this. But I'm wondering if today's kid has kind of a baseline for, maybe they all don't, but is it hard to teach them what the numbers mean, or is it, it just takes a couple sessions and they get on with it? And I think the second part of so kind of learning the language of the numbers, what is good? One of the videos I watch is what is good spin rate? Those types of questions. I need some context to understand the numbers. Is that hard to acquire for a person, for a college pitcher or a high school pitcher? The second question is, Andrew, you just alluded to, we're trying out a new pitch, a new grip, something in a bullpen. Are there numbers that you'll just say, no, this is a disaster. There's no way I'm letting you take that into an inter-squad game? Or is there always a little bit of, those numbers don't make me feel warm and fuzzy, but let's go see what the hitters think?
Where do you want me to start? Question 1 or 2?
Yeah, you do number 2 first, and then we can come back.
I mean, sometimes it is what it is, right? You got a game that weekend, and it's like, hey,
Right.
you're going to battle with whatever you've got, and you're going to go compete, and regardless of what the machine says, it's still hard to hit. So,
Right.
I think we'll take that. But I think in general, there's always a goal for each pitch, and there might be some variability to that, but in general, there's something that we are chasing from a pitch movement perspective. It just might not be there that day. It's not where we want it to be. And we're going to continue to work on that. So you can go to battle with whatever you got and in that day, but it doesn't mean that regardless of the results, sometimes guys will go out in a short burst and the pitch profile isn't great and they'll have success with it. And we're still going to go back to, hey, we want to make this better. This is ultimately about getting good hitters out in big situations that matter, and that means that we're going to continually try to improve our stuff. And if we have something that's giving us numbers that makes us pause a little bit, we'd have to have a lot of history with that pitch to say, hey, the numbers say it's bad, but the hitters keep saying it's good. So I know that's a roundabout answer there, but I think in general, if the numbers aren't great, eventually, for the most part, there's some outliers, but for the most part, those pitches aren't as successful as you want it to be, and you're going to continue to try to work on it. Now, I mean, you also have to. I know this will shock people. You also have to throw strikes. And I have a saying around here that TrackMan said ball, because there'll be a lot of times guys will turn around, and that's the response from me. But I think in general, all strikes being equal, that we're going to try to improve our stuff.
TrackMan says ball. That's great. That the Washington Nationals would have. They would have been better with that sign. They had last spring training, they had the sign that says, nobody cares how hard you threw ball 4. And they would have, and that was not well received. They would have been much better off with a sign that says TrackMan says ball. Larry, I want to come back to the language for you in a second, but I want to ask Andrew one follow-up there. Andrew, this is me being curious. So if you think about 3 types of pitches, fastball, breaking ball, changeup, is there one pitch that the metrics are particularly helpful for helping me? Like is it I would imagine it's not all created equal, but I'm just curious about that. Like if you're trying to help me with a fastball or a breaking ball or a changeup, does one of those pitches lend itself more to the data, or is it kind of comparable?
I would say the feedback that we're getting on all those pitches are that it's all useful. And there's there's different ways to throw different types of changeups and different types of breaking balls and sweepers and gyros and 12-6 breaking balls and different types of changeups. So there's a few different ways to get the ball to move the way you want it to go. But the numbers that we're pulling, if we know what kind of pitch that we're shooting for, it's all comparable based on the pitch. We're trying to, and a lot of times, what's the guy do? What's he coming in with? Why do we recruit him? Does he spin the ball? Does he naturally have, some rise on the pitch? Is it a low arm slot, above average rise guy that's going to pitch to the top of the zone? So we're trying to assess that stuff early and figure out, what's this guy do? What's he do well? Work within what he does well, and then try and enhance his pitches there. And then, take it a step further after we've got pitch profiles where we want to go. If, where are we going to throw these pitches? It's based on the profile of the pitch.
Yep. Very cool. So Larry, let me ask you the language question, because you had to kind of reverse engineer yourself as a pitching person, right? Like you kind of had the full gamut of experiences. I mean, again, 10 years in the big leagues, and then you had to reteach yourself pitching in some ways. So if I'm a high school pitcher and I'm getting myself going with pitchLogic for the very first time, how long do you think it would take you to teach me, to give me context for what I'm, make these numbers make sense so I know what I'm actually trying to do? Is that one session? Is that a few sessions? What would it take?
No, it depends. And a great example of that is one of our professional organizations. We did a demo with them in their spring training, and he had a kid that was out of Stanford that they had just drafted the previous summer, and a high school kid that had 3 years in the organization. And they learn at different speeds. Everybody learns at different speeds, but let's not kid ourselves. Kids come out of the womb with one of these, right? And so kids are learning differently, and they know things differently than I did when I was coming up before the history of all this kind of information. And so the kids that can look at their telephone and get that feedback immediately and learn the number system. I've got 10-year-olds that come up to me and talk to me about arm slot and their spin direction and total spin, and then they break it down into their back spin and their side spin and the rifle spin. And they understand it, and we try to stay away from getting too much, because I'm a huge believer that once you cross the white line, all that stuff's out the window. Then it's game time and you're competing. And I don't think a pitching coach can go out to the mound and say, your last 3 fastballs have been 23-25, 23-27, and we need you to be at 23-50. That's not how you make the adjustments in game. And I don't believe that you can do that. I had a pitching coach say, as I was warming up to face the Red Sox, he said, your arm looks like it's about a half inch low. Well, the 2 1/3 innings that I lasted, I thought about where in the heck is my elbow, and how am I throwing it? So you got to put it aside and go compete, as Andrew was referencing. But the kids pick it up. They understand. And it's not just the pitchers. It's position guys too. Catchers with their arm slot, they drop their wrist down a little bit, and now they're throwing sinkers to second base, or they get too much on top of it and they're cutting the ball to second base, and we're taking time away from their ball speed to second base. And catchers make quick adjustments, learning with it. Long toss is available, and you can pick up the kind of things that you need to improve yourself through those kinds of programs. So the instant feedback, I think, is the biggest thing, and you can experiment with it. We've got a function where you can label. You can throw 5 sliders in a row and label it grip A. Then you go to grip B and you throw 5 a different way, and you look at the numbers, and coach knows this. You've got to, in your gut what you think is best, and your eyes tell you one thing, but then it all comes down to how are our numbers going to look at the end of the day. And when I talk to guys my age and old school guys, and I say, how hard does he throw? And they say 91 to 94. I say, yeah, but the ball does different things at 91 than it does at 94. And we can quantify that. And so you figure out and you narrow that range down.
Yeah. Oh man, so many things you just said there, Larry. Like, first of all, velocity, it's a number, but it all plays differently. Like my 91 might be different than somebody else's 94, all those types of things, or might be different than someone else's 91. I also, when you said the position players, I'm hearing that there are some big league organizations that are actually teaching catchers not to throw a straight 4-seam fat. They want a catcher that's going to throw that ball that runs into the runner. Like there's actually big league people teaching that, which makes sense, right? It's like have the ball beat the runner. And so whether you would agree with that or not, whatever you're teaching your catcher, you've got to get them feedback for, hey, this ball's traveling straight. This ball is running like you want it to. I mean, I remember being converted to outfield in college, and like the thought of throwing a 4-seam beautiful backspin ball from the outfield, I had a better chance to, perform brain surgery than to be able to do that. And
you got to play your slice.
That's exactly right. So, for all the different positions, I could see where this is great. Let's do this, guys. Let's wrap with some examples. So I watched the video. If this really has piqued your interest, I would encourage any listener. There's a video on the pitchLogic website of your guys' presentation at the ABCA, probably in the last couple of years. And Clay Holmes, with who's had 3 incredible seasons with the Yankees as a reliever, he was one of your, he's one of your spokespeople, and he's a real believer. And his career is fascinating. He is speaking of like being careful profiling people, he's a 1st-round pick, high school, out of Alabama. He's the valedictorian of his high school class. So that's not something you'd think, right? You'd think that kid would go to college. And he's in the Pirates organization. And I want to be clear, I'm not beating the Pirates up for this. This is a long time ago. But so the Pirates immediately, his pitch in high school was a sinker. That was his go-to pitch. They immediately make him put that away and only throw 4-seam fastballs because they really wanted to help him develop fastball command. And so he's so talented. He does fine in the minor leagues, but he gets to the big leagues, and it's not going well at all with the Pirates. 2018, 2019, 2 not good years at all. Then the pandemic happens. He gets traded in 2021. And at some point, he's allowed to come back to the sinker, and it's starting to work. But Clay Holmes asked two questions that like epitomize this whole concept. He said, why is this good? Why is this sinker that's, that I've always believed is my bread and butter? Why is this a good pitch? Like, I don't understand why. I know that it is. I don't know why. And then maybe the more important question is, how am I doing this? Like, what, I can't adjust or fix or anything if I don't know how it's happening and how to get back there. So, Andrew, why don't I start with you? Do you have an example of a pitch or a pitcher that you've worked with, or a story like that where this has made a huge difference?
I think in terms of the pitch design stuff of it, we had Rod Boone a few years ago. He was an 8th round pick, Team USA. I believe he was Team USA tryout guy, conference pitcher of the year, freshman conference changeup guy, and we were able to take the data and the information that we got and quantify it and make a really subtle change even mid-season when you started to struggle with it. And we had some foundational numbers that we know we wanted to be at. He got away from it a little bit. We were able to get back to it mid-season and make that adjustment. And he was able to finish the year strong. This is a few years back, just in terms of the data. The pitchLogic tool is able to help in situations like that. It's able to help even more than where we were 5-6 years ago when we were just kind of starting with TrackMan, of just being able to have the ball in your hand more, have it in your hand more consistently, get the immediate feedback. Not that you can't play catch without this. We still have moments where we're not using tech and we're focused on other things. But in general, when you're working on your pitch design, we've had a lot of success with being able to increase the amount of reps, increase the amount of feedback. Rod was a guy that we used the information that we needed. And I think in terms of teaching these guys this, I think it's a language that, as a pitcher that you need to understand. So, maybe you don't need to be able to write a novel in that second language, but you need to be able to order off the menu at a restaurant. I think guys pick it up fairly quickly. We try and give our guys a really early crash course on it, so that when we are talking about things, we're all speaking the same language. I think more and more, I think over the last 4 or 5 years, guys are coming in with a better base foundation and understanding of it. It's not as foreign. I would say, 6 or 7 years ago, it was a small percentage that really understood it, and then it was foreign to everybody else. And I think now you're getting more and more kids that are coming in with a little bit more of a foundation there.
Andrew, a follow-up on Rodney Boone. So as I'm thinking through that scenario, if you don't have access to the data that a pitchLogic can provide, you have a kid that throws a ton of changeups, and then the changeup starts to be less effective. I think, like, if I put my old school coach hat on, one of my first flinches would be, we're throwing that pitch too much. Whereas with the data, you can say, actually, that's not the problem at all. This pitch is materially different than it was. Like, something has changed about this pitch. Is that a fair assessment where my brain's going on that?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Instead of just the guess or the instinct, which is good. I mean, we've all got experience and instinct, and I think there's a lot of times I see with this where it just confirms, I think, what other people are seeing, or a riding fast. We had different names for it, right? A riding fastball, or a heavy ball. And there's just things that I think now we have numbers for that, for the, what we're calling, we got two, a sweeper and a gyro, and we've got different names for it. But I think the things that we in the past maybe instinctually had seen, we can quantify that and confirm that. But I think there's times that we are just flat out wrong. And I know I will sit behind bullpens still and say, hey, that looked good to my eyes. And then look over and go, no, my eyes were wrong. Right. And I've been coaching for 25 years, and it's like, but why would I want to guess if I can be accurate over here?
Makes total sense. Larry, do you
have a little bit more on the Clay Holmes thing, if I can, real quick?
Yeah.
He's 6'5", 245. too. And if you were recruiting him and he threw 95, he was 6'5", 245, what's your first instinct, right?
Yeah.
And
No.
so he comes in and they say, we're going to make you a high fastball type pitcher. And finally, after 3 or 4 years, they said, well, what are you comfortable doing? And he said, well, I was a sinker ball guy. And sinker connotates 90, 91, left-hander turning it over, right-hander turning it over at a lower speed. Well, he's throwing it 97 miles an hour and it's moving this much. And it's still sinking, so he calls it a sinker. So, I certainly understand, but some people saw those numbers and said, we got a chance to make this guy really successful, and obviously he has been.
Yeah.
When you've seen that in the big leagues now too. I mean, if a scout came out 10 years ago and watched one of our guys throw 20 straight sliders in the row out of the bullpen, we'd be getting crushed, right? They'd be like, this guy doesn't use his fastball. He doesn't, now you're seeing it in the big leagues and they're telling guys, no, that's the only pitch you're going to throw, or you're going to throw that thing 80% of the time because the numbers say it doesn't get hit.
Yeah.
And so I think we've got the design part of it, and then there's the usage part of it as well that changes based on the profile of those pitches and the success that they have.
I also think that, like, sometimes I see, and this is more acute with big league relievers, but you see it in college too. Like, a kid comes on the scene and he's got one pitch, but it's one spectacular pitch. And in my mind, maybe this is the paranoid old coach, but I'm always like, okay, one day this kid's going to wake up and he's going to have lost the feel for that pitch. Then what's going to happen? And, so you start to panic a little bit, or wait for that to happen, that to run its course. But it does feel like, if I was to be devil's advocate on my own thought there, the prevention to that is these kids know that pitch better. It's not just feel. Like, they actually understand the pitch. There's a real physical comprehension of that pitch, which would, in theory, like, again, you would hope that they would throw more than one pitch. That you might be on borrowed time for other reasons. But it does feel like these kids have the opportunity to really understand their pitch, infinitely more than we did 20 years ago.
Especially in this day and age of only going one inning. You find everybody's looking for unicorns and outliers, right? What's that one thing that I can use for one inning to progress myself 3 outs towards the end of the game, especially at the pro level, not so much at the college level, but it's become such a specialty thing that if you can go out and throw 14 straight sliders and get 3 outs, great. Thank you. That's all we needed from you, was you needed to get those 2 left-handers and the 1 right-hander out. Now we've got another plan going forward from here. So that is a big part of it. And you build up the other serviceable things for a different look.
Yeah. Awesome. Fellas, I think that's a great place to wrap right there. This was great. I'm so curious about this stuff, and not really being a pitcher. I've got a lot of learning to do here, but I've enjoyed this deep dive very much. I want to encourage all the listeners, the pitchlogic.com website is great. There's a ton of great videos on there. Andrew's interviewed, Tom Walter, Wake Forest interviewed, the Clay Holmes. I mean, just hear it from the horse's mouth there. Like, I didn't realize he was the size of a horse. That really is amazing. But that makes even more sense. At 6'5", 245, we don't need to be throwing sinkers unless they go 97 miles an hour like his does. So, but this was great. Yeah, I really appreciate you guys doing this. I've enjoyed this, learning more about this. And again, like you said, Larry, this applies to high school pitchers. It applies to position players. The way we throw a baseball is so, our success is so incumbent upon that, no matter what position you play or what you do in the game. So very good. Happy holidays, you guys. Happy holidays to all the listeners. Again, pitchlogic.com is the website. And that's it. We'll catch you next time on the D1 Baseball Podcast.